Right, so last week I did a video highlighting escalating tensions on Israel's northern border with Lebanon as Hezbollah looks to be growing into an ever larger conflict. And part of that was news that not only is Israel's allegedly world-beating missile defense system, known as the Iron Dome, being weakened as a result of Hezbollah's actions, but that replacement missiles for it are not forthcoming as Israel's focus remains primarily on Hamas and Gaza, and Benjamin Netanyahu's nonsense fixation on what he calls total victory over Hamas, something even the Israeli army are saying is impossible to achieve, and that Netanyahu is deluding his own people into thinking otherwise. Well, now even the United States is passing comment on the fact that the Iron Dome defense system appears to be failing, is set to fall even, as Hezbollah continued their attack since my video on this last week, and it now apparently risks being completely overwhelmed if full-on war breaks out. Right, so the Israeli Iron Dome defense system, I've spoken about it in several previous videos before. It is a missile interception defense system, if you aren't altogether clear what the Iron Dome is. It comprises multiple missile batteries positioned at strategic points throughout Israel, which are capable of firing small, fast projectile missiles at any incoming rockets that might be fired at Israel in order to intercept and detonate them before they are capable of causing any damage and potential loss of life that would follow. As you can imagine, the exact locations of these batteries is not something Israel make public knowledge of particularly. The overlapping capabilities of each of the missile batteries that collectively make up the Iron Dome is what gives it its strength, and the system has been a source of national pride for Israel, so much so that they've been, let's say, unprepared to share the technology with others, lest it weaken their own defences. Ukraine, for example, were interested in having the technology at one point, devised by Israeli arms firm Rafael, but Israel have said they couldn't possibly have it, the excuse being that it was only devised to deal with Hamas's homemade, relatively weak rockets and couldn't possibly withstand Russian ordnance. But if that were the case, why have the Iron Dome batteries in the north of Israel to shield them from the much more powerful Hezbollah rocket fire, in which case? Israel fundamentally just don't like sharing, it seems. But as I say, if the tech were to get shared, it could be better repelled by Israel's enemies, as they would have potentially another opportunity to study it better. How they made those enemies, though, that's notwithstanding. But still, Hezbollah has been busy attacking and even taking out Iron Dome defense batteries housing these interception missiles, and they've been able to do that because, well, they found out where some of them are, and in no small part is it largely suspected that this was the true reason for the Iranian strike on Israel a few months ago now in retaliation for Israel's strike on Iran's embassy in Damascus. Remember that one? Well, Iran reputedly have far greater firepower than that which they put on show on that night in their retaliatory strike on Israel, the first time they'd ever directly attacked Israel. But they did so in a manner where much of the drones and missiles they fired could be intercepted by the Israeli defences and allied military who were also in the air taking down missiles, such as the US and the UK Air Force, taking out rockets as they flew through Iraqi airspace, for example. And it was surmised that perhaps Iran was doing this in a manner that allowed them to more easily take them out. Knowing Iran could have fired a lot more at Israel, more powerful, more recently developed ordnance as the state is believed to possess, there's been plenty of conjecture that although Iran attacked as a form of retaliation for the Israeli strike, that's the official line, something much of the mainstream media have played down, trying to frame the Iranian strike as unprovoked, of course. What it may well have been in truth, though, was an intelligence-gathering exercise, that Iran fires some of its cheaper, slower arsenal in order to allow Israel's defence systems to take them out, in order to give away the positions of some of those defence system locations, which would, of course, be invaluable information which could be used by Iranian allies, such as Hamas or, indeed, Hezbollah. Now, last week I spoke about how Hezbollah were responsible for wildfires breaking out across northern Israel, where they'd fired into dry areas and caused fires to begin. The more evacuations that had to be conducted to move vulnerable Israeli people south out of the way of these fires, and Hezbollah rocket fire that was continuing as well. Rocket fire which in part was being used to take down some Iron Dome defence systems, but was also aimed at Iron Dome defences within Hezbollah's reach. Two such defensive batteries allegedly were taken out last week, each of these costing somewhere in the region of $50 million. Not only are the loss of Iron Dome batteries weakening the defence system, potentially leaving gaps in shield areas that could be exploited, but the missiles these batteries fire are also not being replaced particularly quickly, since all available ordnance is being prioritised against Hamas in Gaza, meaning Israel's arsenal is getting overstretched Probably part of the reason why Netanyahu is stamping his tiny feet over more American arms deliveries taking their time arriving. And Hezbollah's attacks going forward maybe strikes Israel as less and less able to respond to. A report compiled by a US think tank on Hezbollah's capabilities, however, make the pot shots taken at these Iron Dome batteries perhaps a bit of a moot point. According to this report, Israel has something like 10 Iron Dome batteries to provide air defence with these, as we know from previous reports, not operating currently at 100% right now, with missiles needing to be restocked and replaced, and batteries themselves having been apparently taken out, especially along the northern border. The report has been compiled by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and it makes for grim reading for Israel, frankly, in light of Hezbollah's escalations and refusal to engage with Israel in any meaningful way to de-escalate for as long as Israel continues its attacks in Gaza. The very action by Israel following October 7th that prompted Hezbollah attacks to resume and increase in propensity over the months since. The biggest issue facing Israel is the size of Hezbollah's arsenal, apparently. What they could fire into Israel if they really went into a full-scale war, as is the fear right now that we could be heading into. Hezbollah is the most heavily armed non-state group in the world, and since the last major conflict between Lebanon and Israel ended in 2006, they have been significantly expanding and increasing their arsenal, with estimates that their arsenal now has between 120,000 and 200,000 missiles, most short-range, but also includes long-range ballistic missiles and also includes anti-aircraft missiles, and a range of drones, including so-called suicide drones, which being so small and fast, are already an issue for Israel to cope with. Now, as far as Israeli citizens are concerned, as far as the propaganda goes from their government, their air defense system is world-beating and can deal with anything. Trouble is, according to a 3-year study by the Institute for Counterterrorism at Israel's own Reichman University, a study completed just before the event of October 7th, as it happens, it was concluded that Hezbollah have the capability to fire up to 3,000 missiles a day at a rate that could be sustained for up to 3 weeks, with the aim to collapse Israel's air defences. You can have this world-beating air defence system all you want, but there's only so much you could ever deal with at any one shot, any one time. Here's an excerpt from The Guardian, which has, for a change, actually done quite a good job of spelling out the threat, according to this US report. The expectation of the public and of a significant portion of the leadership that the Israeli Air Force and effective Israeli intelligence systems will succeed in preventing most of the rocket attacks on Israel will be shattered, the report said. This is also the case regarding the public's belief that the threat of Israeli retaliation or a substantial Israeli attack on significant Lebanese assets will force Hezbollah to cease fire or significantly impair their ability to continue attacking Israeli territory. The most serious challenge, experts believe, is likely to be the sheer number of incoming missiles fired in waves deliberately designed to overwhelm Israel's air defense systems. It would be a tall order for Israeli air defenses to confront the widespread rocket arsenal coming from the north, Seth G. Jones, an analyst at the think tank in Washington, said last week, echoing warnings from Pentagon officials. We assess that at least some Iron Dome batteries will be overwhelmed, a senior Biden administration official told CNN, which also reported that Israel was moving extra air defense assets to the north. Israel has about 10 Iron Dome batteries each, with about 4 individual launchers, each battery connected to a radar system that detects incoming missiles. Like all systems, however, it is physically limited by how many threats it can engage simultaneously. Hezbollah's upgraded missile capability has triggered warnings about the threat posed to Israel's civil resilience, prompting plans for coping with mass casualties if war breaks out. Not everyone is convinced that Israel's military and political leadership has fully grasped the risks. Speaking at a conference last week, Shaul Goldstein, head of NOGA, which manages Israel's electrical systems, warned, "We are not ready for a real war. We live in a fantasy world in my eyes." He added that Israel would be uninhabitable after 72 hours without power. You look at all of our infrastructure, the optical fibres, the ports, and I won't go into the sensitive things. We are not in a good place. All in all, it looks like Israelis might be living under a very false sense of security, having been protected and shielded by the West against other nations, and as far as Hezbollah go, like Hamas of course, their violence is not condoned. But neither is that of Israel's. And for as long as Netanyahu is determined to not accept a ceasefire, not work towards a permanent peace, putting his own ambitions and position as Prime Minister of Israel first without any shift, It's very hard to see how Hezbollah won't end up escalating matters further. And if they truly are as heavily armed as this US report implies, with Iran in support of them, of course, as well, that cannot be forgotten. Certainly the media won't let you. How much more escalation will it take for something to shift from the impasse we still seem to be at? Check this video out here for details of what Hezbollah have been up to already, leading up to where we are now, what they've already managed to do, another major conflict in the offing, as this unfortunately looks like we're heading towards. And when you consider it as developed off the back of what Israel has been doing in Gaza for the last 9 months, I can imagine there will be little sympathy for the genocide state all in all. But how many other people, how many other nations will end up being dragged into a wider conflict if this war escalates further? And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.